Hi, everyone. Welcome to Writing at the Intersection with Alison Lubar. Alison Lubar teaches high school English by day and yoga by night. They are a queer, non-binary femme of color whose life work, aside from wordsmithing, has evolved into bringing mindfulness practices and sometimes even poetry to young people. Their debut chapbook, Philosophers Know Nothing About Love, is out now with 30 West, and you can find out more at AlisonLubar.com or on Twitter at The Original Alison. If you are joining us for this session live, I'm going to post those links here in the chat. And if you're on YouTube, check the description box for those links. Otherwise, Alison, please take it away.
All right, I think we have some people in the waiting room too. I've been getting some messages about that. So hopefully everyone's been getting in. I think they have been. Thank you so much, Shani. Appreciate always doing something with Wednesdays on the Blue Stew period. So this workshop is called Writing at the Intersection. My name is Alison Lubar. My pronouns are they, them. And it is mid-December already, but let's get into it. So to maximize writing time. So just a little bit about me. As Ashani said, I am a poet. I also teach high school English. I teach yoga. I have a philosophy background, and I really wanted to propose this session because of my own intersectional identity. And I found that it was something that I was writing a lot about and was a really, not just writing a lot about it, but it was a really great to explore those identities in a really safe and healing and loving way. So for transparency, I'm mixed API, I'm mixed East Asian, I'm queer, I'm non-binary, I'm gay, like all of those things. I'm femme presenting. So all of those are some intersections that I identify with, but intersection doesn't have to be like a marginalized group or a multiply marginalized group. We're going to really unpack the idea of intersection. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but that's okay. So I have two chapbooks out. One is Philosophers Know Nothing About Love. The other is Queer Feast. And I have two coming up in 2023, which is super exciting, that really unpacks some of those intersections as well. But enough about me. So our goals are really to have a meditation, not like a mindfulness exercise, but kind of a meditation on the phenomenology of the idea of intersection. So what it actually is. We'll read and discuss some poems, and then we'll do some generative writing exercises. We'll do some brainstorming that will hopefully have you leaving with lots of, as Amy Beth Sisson says, seeds of poems. So beginning, just as a little opener, if you'd like to introduce yourself with your name, your pronouns, and your favorite place, you're welcome to come off of mute. You're welcome to put that in the chat. I'm just opening the chat here. And if you don't feel like saying anything because this is being recorded, then that's perfectly okay too. So I'll go first, I'll model. My name is Alison. My pronouns are they, them. And my favorite place is the backyard of my auntie's house in Oakland. And you'll see why I asked you this question. These sneaky teachers, we always have a why.
My name is Mona. I have she, her pronouns. My favorite place is anywhere I can sit on a beach and feed seagulls.
Love that. Ooh, I love that there's the activity with it too. Seagulls can get like pretty passionate about about their food. Anyone else, either in the chat or off of mute? Rachel, is that cool for me to read yours aloud? You can just put a yes in the chat, yes or no. Yeah, awesome. So Rachel, she, her, and Rachel's favorite place is her room. Great answer. Same sometimes, right? Jennifer, is that cool if I share? You can just put that in the chat. And Navneet, oh, awesome. So Navneet, she, her, anywhere there are mountains around me and a place to put a tent up. Oh, I love that. Oh, I can smell that in my mind already, like the fresh air. Jennifer said, hi all, I'm Jennifer, she, her. My favorite place is the Temple Mount at the Ocmulgee National Monument here in Macon, Georgia, where I live with my son. I'll have to look that up to ensure my pronunciation. Darcy, she, her, with the seagulls. Ryan and Marge, good to share?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. So Marge, she, her, any independently owned coffee house, same, so many good ones in Philly. Thank you, Ryan. So Ryan, he, they, and she, my favorite place is my imagination. Ooh, awesome. All right. So the reason I want to ask you this is a place is your favorite place is a point of meeting. It's the end point of an intersection. So there's a time, there's a sense of space-time where you've done something to enter into that space, and there's a point in which you've left that space as well. So even transforming our idea of intersection, not just of something within like internal identity, but a place as an intersection. I'm even thinking of like APRA magazine had an issue focused on X, or the idea of 10 and X as an intersection in that way. So thinking of your favorite place, how do you get there? What are things that meet there, like Mona and the seagulls, and maybe like a bucket of boardwalk fries, like all of those intersecting at the singular place in time. So considering what is the genesis of your getting to that space, especially if it's something like metaphysical, like Ryan said, like their imagination. So what needs to be, what are the conditions that need to happen for you to access something like that? So we're going to move on to a little bit of brainstorming, just discussion. So what is an intersection and what does it have to do with identity? So I'm going to give you about like 60 to 90 seconds to think about that. You're welcome to put things in the chat. And from now, I'm going to assume that if you put things in the chat, they're cool to read out loud, just for consent purposes. All right, so take like 60 seconds. And there are no wrong answers with this. And again, this doesn't have to be like dictionary definition or what does an intersection make you think of right away. So feel free to come off of mute or to type something in the chat as well. An overlapping of aspects of self. Ooh, I love that. It makes me think of like phyllo dough in a way, but also like different, like the old school, like transparencies, like stacking those one on top of each other. Yeah, Mona says where one thing or aspect meets another, a part of us. Ooh, and I even like that word choice, like part of us, the idea of being a part of an intersection or part of the idea of a whole. Really cool. Of universality of experience. Yeah. Oh, I love that idea, Navneet. So it's a place that it's an idea or a mental place or some physical experience that everyone has had an experience of. Yeah. Darcy said a personal Venn diagram. Oh, I love that. I love saying like, oh, the Venn diagram is a circle. Like it's a great way to have a sassy response. But yeah, so a place where you have that, like that beautiful like shape of overlap. Jennifer said, I can't help but think about my parents and how I carry a part of them, each of them, usually unconsciously. Yeah. So even thinking like in some ways like genetic material and DNA, chromosomes, like all that stuff, but then even personality aspects. So really like playing with what are the physical intersections and what are the metaphysical intersections as well. Marge said a juncture point that extends outward versus contracts at the point of meeting. Ooh, that's so cool, Marge. And she elaborates, relates to identity and that it's expansive. So instead of a meeting place, it's a point where things come from. So it's in that way, like both a destination and an origin point. Yeah, dichotomies. There are no dichotomies. We contain multitudes. Amazing. Any other thoughts about this? This has been like really great so far, like all like A++ for participation. All right. So just some things that I came up with in doing this, whether this is additive or not, I thought of like a crossing, a convergence, a meeting, a joining, an interchange, crossroads, and then in terms of like identities, race, sex, gender, orientation, phases in life. So I think of like crossing that stage at a high school graduation. Like there are these like time slices, and at one of those, that's the point where someone becomes a graduate. But it all goes back to the idea of identity. So is identity an aggregate or not? The roles that you play in your life. And if you think of like in your own like poet bios or writer bios or artist bios, like poet, writer, teacher, are all of these roles in intersection. Past and future selves, physical spaces, crossing any kind of threshold, like at this point stepping, or think of even the tradition of like jumping the broom at a wedding, right? Jumping from one place to another, or like Dante's Divine Comedy, like going through those. I don't want to compare that to marriage and the gates of hell. That was not intentional. Also the idea of knowledge versus understanding, and any kind of change in ontological status. So change in the type of existence that you have. So the first example is a little bit of a longer poem. And as we're reading this, I'll have it up on the screen, and I'll also put the link to it in the chat. It's by one of my favorite poets, Chen Chen. This is his poem in Noisy Mouthfuls. And as we read this, consider, and then we'll have a short discussion afterwards of what's the role of intersection in this poem, or how does this poem address intersections? So I will click on it. It will open here, and I will put it in the chat. I know that it's definitely like a little bit of a longer poem. Would anyone be interested? Try to zoom in here. There we go. Is anyone interested in reading this for us? I'm happy to do it as well.
I can read.
That'd be awesome, Mona. Thank you.
Can't stop eating you, movie style extra butter microwave popcorn. Can't stop watching you. Rented a movie about an immigrant family from Lebanon. Can't help but weep seeing the family wave goodbye to relatives in the Beirut airport. Tear salt mixing with popcorn salt. Can't hide my mess, myself, from the friend beside me. Can't answer his question. Does it remind you of your family leaving China? I want to say no, it's completely different, which in many ways it is, but really, I'm remembering what a writer friend once said to me. All you write about is being gay or Chinese, how I can't get over that and wonder if it's true. If everything I write is in some way an immigrant narrative or another coming out story, I recall a recent poem featuring fishmongers in Seattle, and that makes me happy. Clearly that one isn't about being gay or Chinese. But then I remember a significant number of Chinese immigrants live in Seattle, and how I found several of the Pike Place fishmongers attractive when I visited. So I guess that poem's about being gay and Chinese too. So I say to my friend, I'm not sure, and keep eating the popcorn. Thank God we chose the giant family-sized bag. Can't stop the greasy handfuls, noisy mouthfuls. Can't eat popcorn quietly. Later, during my friend's smoke break, still can't come up with a worthy response to his radical queer critique of normativity, of monogamy, domesticity, front long glory. These middle-class gays picking out garden gnomes, ignoring all the anti-racist work of decolonization that still needs to be done. Don't you think they're lame? I say, yeah, for sure. But think, marriage, house, 1 kid, 2 cats. How long have I wanted that? Could I give that up in the name of being a real queer? Probably can't. And it's like another bad habit I can't give up. Eating junk, can't. Procrastinating, can't. Picking scabs, can't. Being friends with people who challenge my beliefs and life plans, can't. Reading and believing in Ayn Rand, though, can. Brief phase as a Christian because I liked the cross as an accessory, can. WWJD, can. White heterosexist patriarchy, can. America, can't. Can't help but think when we get back to the movie, how it was my father's decision to move here, not my mother's, just like the parents on screen. Can't stop replaying my mother's walk onto the plane carrying me, though I was getting too old for it. holding me, my face pressed into her hair, her neck, as she cried quietly. Can't stop returning to this scene of leaving. Can't stop pausing the scene, thinking, I've left something out again. Something else my mother told me. Like my grandmother at the airport, how she saw my small body so tied to my mother's, and still she doubted. She had to say, you better not lose him. And my mother kept that promise till she couldn't. She lost me in the new country. But doesn't that happen to all parents and their children one way or another? And don't we need to get lost? Lost, dizzy, stubbly, warm, stumbling. Whoa, that's what it felt like. 17, kissing a boy for the first time. Can't forget it. Can't forget when my mother found out and said, this would never have happened if we hadn't come to this country. But it would have happened, every bit as dizzy, lost back in China. It didn't happen because of America, dirty Americans. It was me, my need. My father said, you have no change, you have to change, but I can't give you up, boys and heat, scruff and sweet. Can't get over you. Trying to get over what my writer friend said. All you write about is being gay or Chinese. Wish I had thought to say to him, all you write about is being white or an asshole. Wish I had said, no, I already write about everything. And everything is salt, noise, struggle, hair, carrying, kisses, leaving, myth, popcorn, mothers, bad habits, questions.
Thank you so much for that reading, for that marathon. So take maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and you have the link to the poem. I can throw it back in there too if anyone needs it, and consider the questions. What's the role of the intersection in this poem? Or how does this poem address intersections? And if that seems like a little like too big of a question, you can even just list the types of intersections that Chen writes about too. So taking 2 or 3 minutes. All right. That was my timer. So again, considering what's the role of intersections, or how does this poem address those intersections. So Ryan said the intersection can be so problematic. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So one thing we're going to do, and I think we're only going to do one sample because I want to get you to writing time. I will mention the other poems, but yes, considering what is the relationship among these different intersections as well. Absolutely. And then even as a further, like a follow-up question to that, like problematic for whom? Sometimes it's not problematic for the self, and then it becomes problematic for others, or in different situations, it can like feel problematic too. So any thoughts? Again, you can come off of mute, you can type in the chat, like whatever your jam is today.
I'll point out something.
Awesome, thank you.
I love how in this work they comment on, I think writers and artists of all kinds get that critique of like, you stay in this one topic in this one zone. And when we're talking about identity and intersections, it's like, when you've been othered so much, I think, you know, talking about these things as an immigrant, as part of the LGBTQ community, of course, that's going to like take up so much of your work because you have people commenting or like making you aware of it every single day. And I love that he ends like, well, you only write about being white and an asshole. And it's like, yeah, because they have nothing else to write about. So I just found that very interesting. As someone who writes a lot about mental health, you know, it's when you're always struggling with that, it's something that is in your work a lot.
Absolutely, Rachel, that's such a great point, especially like considering like, well, everything I write is a reflection of me. So how could it not be? Absolutely. And to see like, and it's interesting in that sometimes like our own writing or our own art can kind of tell us who we think we are better than like the way that we would almost like answer it automatically. It's like, oh, like this is something that's coming up a lot in my writing. Like that's interesting as another way to understand who you are. And that's why like writing with like this idea or looking at your own writing like for your intersections is an interesting way to get to know yourself as a creative and just as a person. Another way, really great point. All right, some comments in here, thoughts in here. So Mona says the speaker was a nice guy to his friend, but also didn't say what he really wanted to say. Yeah, absolutely, Mona. So then in what ways like do we feel, or sometimes do we need to, or feel the need to play nice or kind of mute a part of ourselves or take out one of those layers or put a block over like part of who we are to feel like we belong, or not even that, to fit in or to keep the peace or to keep things to avoid conflict. Yeah. So, and even that goes back to Ryan's point about like how intersections can be really problematic too. So Jennifer says, I saw a tweet from Chen Chen where he commented that white normative imagination cannot accept the nuances of brown people's lives. I get that a lot of in this poem of his, intersection equals life's themes arising over and over, demanding to be dealt with. Yeah, I mean, if you don't follow like Chen on Twitter, like he's like amazing. I mean, like all of my Blue Stoop sessions are just like me fan queering over like Chen. And then Jennifer followed up with, I, for instance, have written poems recently that I'd already written 10 years ago. Oh, wow. So the idea that like noticing this intersection, it's almost like, oh, like Google Maps has brought me to here again. Like, oh, like this intersection again, like, oh, I'm here again. That's interesting. And that sense of return or that cyclical sense of time. And until you kind of move out of that, or maybe it's not something you ever move out of or want to. Really, really great. Yeah, that's weird and like so cool. Marge, you have a hand raised, and just so I can't see everyone's hands raised. I'm going to keep scrolling up and down, but Marge, go ahead.
Actually, Alison, I learned that if someone raises hand, it goes to the top of the queue.
Amazing.
So you'll always get notified. I was looking at intersection as the third way. of something. So was admiring the tercets, and then that the last line is a series of three. And where was merging, like even a lot of the imagery, the salt, his tears mixing with the popcorn, his tear salt mixing with the popcorn salt. Even stuff like real life family versus the film family or the movie style, real queer versus I guess the not real queer, all the even him on the couch. I was just looking at physical intersections, him on the couch, all the besides, stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely. These are phenomenal observations. And then like in terms of like the selection of detail with like the tear salt mixing with the popcorn salt, the sense of like dualism, and then especially like even in the structure of the poem, the sense of three of these things grouped together and grouped together and grouped together and grouped together. And then even at the very last line, we have the singular line, but then three parts, three things in that as well. So even considering like, and we'll look at this momentarily too, like how you can use structure as a way to explore intersection as well. Like really excellent commentary on form. Thank you, Marge. So Ryan says cyclical sense of time and also of experience. We have the same, for example, radicalized experiences over and over and over, or sorry, racialized, yeah. Wow, interesting, Freud, right? Racialized experiences over and over and over. How might we have the same cycles of thought, or how we might not have the same cycles of thought? Yeah, so even thinking of those in terms of patterns, it's so fascinating how a conversation about intersections also brings up a conversation about patterns and thinking of grids. I even think of like the way that Philadelphia is laid out in that like grid-like structure, and even like certain like meeting points. But absolutely, yeah, really awesome, Ryan. Wow, I'm going to teach adults more often. No, the kids are great. The kids are wonderful. Okay, so for sake of time and to get to writing, I'm just going to show you what the other poems were, the titles of them. So the second sample was The Vacant Lot by Gwendolyn Brooks, which is super, super short. The good thing is this is being recorded, so you can always go back, and all of these are actually on Poetry Foundation, so you can Google them, they'll come up. Who Said It Was Simple by Audre Lorde, which is one of my personal favorites. That actually a friend recommended when I was like, how do I like tackle this like seemingly competing identity thing? And finally, I wanted to go a little bit like old school. The World Is Too Much With Us is a Wordsworth sonnet. It's The World Is Too Much With Us late and soon, and it's about humanity and nature, and even thinking of the intersection of humankind and nature, especially in the Anthropocene, especially in this era that we're living through now. So a couple other poems to consider: Theme for English B, Sylvia Plath's Mirror, The Road Not Taken. I was also thinking Shadow Boxer by Fiona Apple. To the Man Who Shouted, I Like Pork Fried Rice to Me on the Streets is an incredible poem by Franny Choi. This is in no way a complete list, but a lot of writers I was thinking about really focus on identity and the tension among identities. So now, finally, writing time or brainstorming time. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to make a list of intersections that resonate with you. And I'll put that in the chat too. So 5 minutes to make a list of intersections that resonate with you. All right. And go. All right, that is 5 minutes. And I realized I may have been like a little bit too much time, but even if I feel like you exhausted your list, then there were ways that would start like generating like something else. So optional share for any of the identities that came up with that emerged, or not the identities, the intersections, or what did this process feel like? What kinds of feelings came up for you? What did this bring you back to? And again, no obligation to share. I just want to give this space for that, because it's going to be really generative in and of itself to hear what came up for someone else too.
I can share a minute.
Yeah.
I've always felt like the different stages of my life were like a different life. Like I was a different person. So like my distant past and my middle past and now, and not knowing about my future, it's like a whole different life. Like I was a different person. So I consider them possibly different intersections. But I always had that one thing that kept me grounded, and that was sitting on the beach with seagulls. So that's just that's what keeps me grounded. And other things came and went in the past, and they probably will in the future. But yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mona. So even like what persists throughout those intersections or those eras, or almost thinking it's like a bunch of like Venn diagrams like strung together in a way too. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
I don't even feel like they are part of my life. I feel like it was a different life.
Wow. Yeah. And then even like just having that, I'm really glad that then that's the favorite place that you brought up, and how that was something that really was the connecting point. And then even building on that idea, I think it was maybe Marge who said that a place, not a place of origin, but a place that, well, things expand from rather than contract to, in that way. Anyone else?
Allison, this is Jennifer. I have to keep my camera off because my Chromebook hates Zoom, and I'll freeze if, if I turn on. But
No worries.
I can't remember who it was who was just talking about the threes, the things occurring in threes. But that's where I was with this prompt, and it kept what I had. My list is a list of like equations, like this equals this, like
That's so fascinating. And it actually goes into what the next part of this is. I'm not sure if you.
You're
Oh,
pushing against fatigue. You know, like want with fatigue.
mm,
Um, so, which is, I think, the situation with these last 2 years, just a lot of like ramping up and then getting to this middle space and then just feeling tired and like nothing's working. So yeah, I don't know, for some reason that's what the intersection is looking like for me.
that's amazing. I love that idea of even thinking of it in like adding that like mathematical element or like that scientific element to it in terms of like, well, what is the formula for this? And these things like added together, what does that equal? And then I think you also added a really other cool element to that, which is the sense of time. So it's an intersection, but for how long? And what is the length of this convergence, as opposed to like the divergence of it too? Wow, that's really fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing that too. And actually like kind of inspired by that too, in a way. I'm going to move on to the next little brainstorm part, um, which some of you have already like been hinting at, which is you're going to, so for the second, maybe 3-ish minutes, you're going to put combinations together and consider what's the relationship between or among these intersections. Is there tension? Is there evolution? Is there ease? Is there trouble? Is there conflict? Are they problematic? Like the way, like what Ryan brought up too, or how do they, what happens at that convergence? Or how do you see them all in the same, with the same weight? So I'm going to give you about like 3-ish minutes for that. Oh, I'm so sorry, Ryan. Let me put that in the chat too. All right. So just as last time, any optional share or what came up for you, you can again just like throw something quickly in the chat, or you can come off of mute. Maybe take like just like a minute or so for share if you want.
I reflected on the intersection of my body with the world and how to create safety.
Mm. Oh, that resonates. Yeah. So it's I'm thinking of that like equation sense that Jennifer mentioned too, of like body plus world, like the equal sign with the slash through it, safety, or like, or equals and then question mark. So what is that intersection? That's really amazing. Thank you. Yeah, the beginning of a prose poem. Oh no, we love to see it. Amazing. And we're gonna get interesting too, prose poetry as a type of intersection too, because you have the sounds and the sounds of poetry with the form of prose too. Which is a great segue to the next element of this. And still, if there are things you want to put in the chat, you're always welcome to do that. So intersection of form and function, which is, this is, just some magic we're doing with how everything's been leading to each other. So considering how can the shape and form of a poem mirror the intersection that you're writing about. So considering like the form of poem, like a duplex, like looking up Jericho Brown's duplexes. If you're familiar with that, they're amazing. If not, like that's your research homework. Thinking of sonnets, the octave and sestet. So even in like in an Italian and a Petrarchan sonnet, it has a question and then an answer. Like that's how it's usually set up, but you don't have to follow any rules. Having any kind of two-part poem or making a diptych or a triptych in some way. So separating it into night and day, part 1 and 2, before and after, in and out. Some sense of crossing the threshold, or even dividing your poem up into different sections and still using repetition in some way to show that common thread or what persists throughout it. Or then even writing in couplets, the way Chen wrote in tercets too. So considering how the form can echo the meaning that or the ideas that you're writing about. And you can always like actually start form first and then let the words come from that. So those are two ways to approach writing about this idea of intersections too. All right, and perfect. So for the last portion, I'm going to give you, just for the sake of time, let's do 7 minutes, and I will put this in the chat. So to start writing. Oh yeah, Mona said sometimes I start with notes first, like we did here. Absolutely. So for this last little bit, you'll choose one of the groupings of intersections or common connections or equations, like you've all like collaborated on the connections among the intersections, and begin to elaborate. What's the feeling? What's the snapshot? What's the symbol? Find a way to enter into the poem and know that like your writing of it doesn't have to be at the beginning. You can start with that second part and go back to writing the first. So I'm going to give you, again, about like 6 minutes, just to give us a little bit of time at the end. All right, that is our timer. So we have a final optional share or what came up for you, and then we can stop the recording in like a moment or so if you'd like to share. Actually, let me just show my last slide with like, thank you, here's my info, and then we can turn the recording off and then have time to share in case there are things that, in case you want to read work that like make it out there. We'll definitely get out there. All right, so this is just my info. If you want more of me, it's my email, where you can find me on Twitter. I respond I respond to DMs probably like more quickly than emails. And then my website is just alisonlubar.com. So if we can stop the recording, and then if anyone wants to share anything that they